Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar on chaos. We're going to hang tight for about a minute, let other people join, and then we will get started. We're going to be talking about chaos to calm, workforce strategies in 2026. That's today's webinar. Just hang tight for a few more minutes, and we're going to let other people join us. We have quite the crowd. Um, Interesting topic, it looks like, for everybody who is in the warehouse and labor management industry. Yeah, it looks like a lot more people joining us. This is great. Well, on that note, let's not let all these people wait and let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to Chaos to Calm Workforce Strategies for 2026. Over the next 30 to 45 minutes, we're going to talk about what's really happening inside of warehouses, distribution centers. These are not theories, these are not headlines by any stretch of the imagination, but what operators are experiencing right now. Rising labor costs, absenteeism, tariffs, no question about those tariffs, automation questions, peak season unpredictability. These are all topics that we're going to cover today. And more importantly, how to move from reactive chaos to structured calm. I'm joined today by Valentine Trent, VP of Market Development at iJility, and Campbell Diehl, who leads operations and workforce solutions at iJility. They're in facilities every week. They see what works. They know what quietly drains the margin. And on that note, let me introduce their mugshots over here, as well as myself. I'm the host for today's webinar. Welcome, Valentine. Welcome, Campbell. Good to see you guys on the show.
Good to be here.
Thanks for
Thanks for
having us.
asking us.
So let's talk about where we are and what's going on. Before we dive in, let's start with a simple question. What feels most different compared to 2 years ago in this industry? Campbell, what are your thoughts?
I think what feels different now is the amount of volatility that operators are dealing with. It's not just that things are hard anymore. Demand, labor, cost pressure are all moving very quickly, and so the margin for error is very small.
Mhm.
Valentine, what are your thoughts?
I think the biggest shift is that the workforce strategy has become more of a board level conversation. It's no longer just an HR issue, and it's directly tied to the profitability and the risk management of an organization.
Very cool. I mean, is this a scenario where what we're calling chaos for today's presentation are we really saying that this is the new norm? Campbell?
Uh, we see chaos in warehouses that don't have systems in place to absorb the variability that they experience. When variability hits, weak systems often turn into chaos, and strong systems are built to absorb it.
Mhm.
What do you think, Valentine? I'm sure you got some
I
thoughts on this
agree.
too.
I do. I think it's a new operating environment that we're living in today. And I think that the companies that are waiting for things to sort of settle down are going
Right.
to struggle today and continue to struggle. I
Yep.
think it's the ones that are building some sort of systems around volatility that are going to thrive for sure.
Very cool. I think, I guess the other, now that you bring it up, Valentine, what should operators be most concerned about?
Well,
Campbell, Valentine?
I'll start. I mean, I think one of the biggest mistakes that companies make is underestimating the financial impact of things like absenteeism, turnover, rework. I mean, those are the things that quietly eat your margin every day. And margin erosion doesn't come from one dramatic failure, it comes from daily instability. And so, unfortunately, what we find is most operators begin to feel the pain before they measure it.
I
Valentine?
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree totally. And I think that losing control of your workforce model is a big deal. And
Mhm.
what we've seen in the companies that we've worked with, and we go into hundreds of facilities every year. If you don't own your labor strategy, it will most certainly own you. So you got to be real careful with that.
I think this is a great way to start this webinar. Let's move into, let's kind of zoom out for a minute. Let's take a look at the broader picture. If we're going to move from chaos to calm, we need to understand what's actually shaping, the landscape in 2026. We've got rising labor complexities, you got tariffs, you've got automation shifts and increasing customer expectations. I think the expectations are probably going right through the roof. So let's break it down a little bit. Let's take a look at um, the challenges that's going on in the warehouses. We can take a look at the tariffs and costs. Campbell, where do you see tariffs actually show up inside of warehouse operations?
Well, the thing about tariffs is there's no, for most operations, there's no revenue tied to the impact that, the tariffs cause in your operation, right? I mean, there's a large amount of adjustment and rework that has to happen, and tariffs show up a lot of times as a pressure to do more with less. And so when your costs rise upstream, your downstream operations are getting squeezed. And so a lot of that pressure lands directly on your labor efficiency. And we work with a company who has, uh, swings of 250 to 500,000 units that have to be relabeled in a 2 to 3 week period. And then that work goes away for a little while and then it comes back, right? And so if you're not prepared for that sort of thing and you don't have a solid strategy around how you're going to flex up, flex down, and accommodate those influx of costs, you're going to have a pretty rough go.
So
Mhm.
when you say costs are going up, are we saying that leadership is asking operations to absorb it, or how are they absorbing the additional costs?
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you're not prepared, you're going to deal with overtime, you're going to deal with employee fatigue, you're going to deal with turnover,
Mhm.
quality issues, and that sort of thing. So having a flexible workforce and a solid strategy around how you're going to move the people to the work and be able to handle the rising and the dips and the valleys and the peaks of what's going on, you're going to deal with challenges from a margin standpoint for sure.
Yes. And
I mean,
if I
Valentine, yeah, go ahead,
Sure.
please.
If I might
Absolutely.
just add, I was going to say, I think that companies, very similar to what Campbell said, are reacting to the tariff-driven cost pressures and labor constraints with short-term adjustments like hiring caution and price hikes. But I think the real winners in today's world are proactively sort of restructuring what they've got going on for the long-term stability. And they're doing that through like AI powered reskilling, agile talent orchestration, reshoring investments, and using that flexible workforce model that turns some uncertainty into possible long term resilience. That's what we see.
Now, is this in reference to what leadership's perspective is on um, how they're managing tariffs,
I
Valentine?
think, yes, yes, for sure. The ones that are successful, those are the ones that are focused on sort of stabilizing their force and looking at long-term flexible models and again owning what's going on in your world instead of just sort of letting it
Yeah.
own you.
So I mean, this is probably a good spot to kind of move into the next topic over here, which is labor shortages and absenteeism. So when we're talking about labor, we've been hearing about shortages for years. I mean, that's been going on for a while, but I don't know if there really is a shortage. But it certainly feels that way, or something feels different nowadays. Campbell, what are you seeing inside the facilities?
Yeah, I think labor has changed in a way where, the workforce expects different things. And if you're not adjusting to those expectations and building strategies around accommodating what the workforce expects, you're going to deal with absenteeism and turnover. And to me, absenteeism is one of the most underestimated disruptors in an operation. And when 10 to 20% of your workforce doesn't show up, your workflow is shifting almost immediately. And you're moving around labor, your supervisors are fighting fires, performance usually starts to slip, maybe in several places. There's a Mike Tyson quote that I like about everybody having a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And so operations are no different, really. The real question is whether your labor model is built to take that hit without everything unraveling.
I mean, what
Mhm.
you're talking about is kind of a ripple effect starting one place and then the dominoes going falling. I mean, that's not just an HR problem, right?
No, no, yeah, that hits truly your throughput, your quality, and your costs.
Mhm.
Valentine, I mean, what's changed about employee expectation? I mean, because it's one thing about the leadership, it's another thing about the employees. What do you see any changes as far as expectations are concerned?
I do, I think that the whole COVID episode changed a lot in our world. And when I look at coming out, what I'm going to call coming out of COVID 2024 officially to today, everybody wants something for nothing. Everybody wants to make money, but not really work.
Mhm.
People want to work from home. There's a lot of things that have been disruptors regarding that. And I would say that it can cause a lot of very high level frustration in the environments where, you need people to be there. And, what message is that sending? And so, I would just say that um, to what Campbell was saying also, I think turnover is a huge issue because that also creates quality problems. And, there seems to be this revolving door, especially when it comes to the world we live in, which is more of the light industrial supply chain, in the warehouses and manufacturing. And it's just amazing. People are scared because they think AI is going to take their job, but yet they don't want to come in and do what needs to be done to make sure AI doesn't take their job. So
But
it's
I
really
mean,
interesting.
but you bring up an interesting point. Agility is involved in the recruiting process as well, and so that's part of this management process. And so retention is now more about structure than recruiting, right? I mean, it's not
Yes.
just. I mean, when we're talking about retention, we're talking about recruiting. You want to continue on that, Valentine?
Well, I would say, yes, you're talking about recruiting, but really more in the retention side, you're talking about what's going on at the site and how's that leadership treating that team and how are they guiding them and mentoring them and allowing them to rise up. And I think incentives are really important and I think they really work, but you got to make sure that you're all aligned in what your goals are because they can sort of crisscross and counteract each other, if you will, right? And so you have to really sort of focus on that as well.
I mean, and you brought up an interesting point about AI, right? So we have automation, we have AI. It's everywhere. It's certainly part of everybody's conversations. I don't care what industry you're in.
Right.
And I mean, Campbell, is that realistic in terms of where AI and automation are heading?
Yeah, everyone likes to talk about AI and automation, right? And to Valentine's point, there's a lot of, anxiety and fear around AI and automation taking jobs. And, at the same time, a lot of companies are looking at how it can boost productivity, right? But I think the real issue lies in how people are incorporating it into their operation, right? And automation can 100% help improve the performance of your operation, but it's not a substitute for workforce discipline, right?
Right.
Technology
Very good.
without some
Very good
sort of
point.
engaged labor, it's going to fail, right? You've got to have an understanding of how the two things are going to work together. We've worked with a facility that, when we arrived, was riddled with automation and robotics, and it looked great, but they had twice the amount of labor that they needed to operate with this robotic solution in mind. And so it's, over time, we were able to help them figure out how to sort of balance out and flow that operation. And it hums like a machine. It's great, but you can see the difference then versus now of what a solid strategy and and what real workforce discipline and management discipline looks like as it works alongside automation and as that becomes more prevalent in operations.
I mean, what I love about everything you guys have been talking about so far is that you're bringing in your knowledge and your experiences, and so we're able to refer back to those. And I think what Campbell, what you're basically saying is that automation isn't a silver bullet, number one. And I think number two is anytime you talk about automation or AI, there's going to be some investment dollars that are going to go into this as well. And
Yeah.
so, irrespective, I think the question is, what role should automation play? I mean, what are your thoughts, Valentine?
I think that the big freak out about everybody's going to lose their job because AI is going to take it over is a little silly. I agree with what Campbell said, but I also think that there is a human decision-making element
Yeah.
that comes in with a lot of positions that right now AI isn't going to be able to do. And so I think that, settle down, everyone. I think it's going to boost and help us versus take over the world.
Right, right. And I do think I'm jumping ahead a little bit on these slides, but when it comes to where are we at in this space, perhaps you can talk about a little bit more about what are the common mistakes that are going on, or where companies might lose money. Campbell, you want to start us off on that?
Yeah, I think reactivity is a big component of that, right? I mean, there's an over-reliance on temp labor without some sort of accountability around it. Throwing heads at a problem is throwing costs at a problem if you don't have controls built in place, right? Without some sort of way to track the dollars that you're spending in terms of what they're getting back for you and how you're holding, your people accountable. It's a wasted effort. I mean, you're hurting yourself more, right? So,
Mhm.
I love the expression, you can't fix what you don't measure. So I think, you know, bring in the staff you need, but make sure they're doing it the way that you need them to do it.
I mean, this is what you're basically saying is, when we're looking at what the chaos looks like in the warehouse, we need to kind of bring it down to something that's not focused on reaction.
Mhm.
Right? I mean, Valentine, what are your,
Yes.
I'm sure you got some experiences.
Oh my goodness. What you just said is so, so important. And I think that, people still drive performance. And I think that the companies that are winning are integrating technology with a strong workforce design behind it or with it, if you will. And I think that that's huge.
Very cool. I mean, where do you see companies losing money? I mean, is there any specific spot, or is it kind of broad in terms of the quote unquote chaos in the warehouse?
So you're not speaking relative to AI specifically
No, just
robots.
in
You're saying just
general.
in general.
Yeah, just
Well,
in general.
I mean, I think turnover is a huge one
Yeah.
again, because right now it costs about $4,600 to hire like a warehouse person. Okay.
That's an interesting
So,
number. Cool.
yes. So you bring them in and then you train them and then you let them go and then they leave and then you have to bring another new one in and train them and how many quality errors are happening. That's how I always sort of equate the turnover to quality because you can see it. There's a direct correlation there. And so
That's amazing.
companies have SLAs, they
Hmm.
have quality requirements for their
Hmm.
customers, whether it be you and I as the consumer or a company that they're selling to. And so they've got to meet all those. And that's a really big deal.
So what you're saying is every time somebody new comes in, every time there's a turnover, there's a $4,600 cost associated to it
Yes.
each time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Well,
that's huge.
and then you have the training dollars of whatever trainer, leader. So a lot of times what'll happen is a supervisor or a lead will be responsible for doing the training. They don't necessarily have a trainer on staff that's all they do because that's an expense as well. And
Yeah.
so imagine every time you have this turnover, you're spending all that money, but then you're also turning around and spending money on that leader not focusing on core competencies of the company, but and what's going on in the facility, but now they're retraining. And so
Yeah.
there's so many soft dollar costs that frankly, Campbell and I could never even put a number on.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts, Campbell? That's an interesting part in terms of losing money.
Yeah, yeah, it's a slippery slope and also a bit of a snowball effect. I mean, you're you're dealing with that turnover and quietly, digging a bigger hole for yourself, right? That you have to climb out of. And it seems like it just keeps getting bigger and bigger over time and the costs keep rising and rising. And at a certain point, you've got to reset and reevaluate and look at how you're going to adjust because, you know, insanity's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So,
Well, let's move into
Good
something more
point.
positive then, right? Let's take a look at how iJility is going to move, and let's talk about solutions. Let's figure out how we're going to move this thing around. So, if we think about implementing fair pay, we think about measurable incentives, companies, how they can reduce absenteeism, maybe drive higher quality or build loyal workforces so that we're not having that $4,600 every single time. I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of the solutions on, let's say, fair pay and measurable output, Campbell?
yeah, I think, the labor cost expectation, or at least pay expectations are rising. I mean, we're dealing with inflation. Everybody knows,
Mhm.
groceries are more these days, right? So you've got to find a way to accommodate that for your workforce. I mean, pizza parties aren't going to do it anymore.
It's
So
nice. It
it's
doesn't, but you're
they're
right.
not exactly.
It's not going to fix it.
But we see that when employees see a direct connection between their effort and their earnings, performance naturally rises. And so when you find ways to tie those two things together, you see a lot of that noise begin to subside.
Mhm.
Yeah. Valentine, what are your thoughts on fair
I
pay
would
and
totally
measurable?
agree. And I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself in this, but I
Yeah.
would say that there's a lot of incentive programs that can be instituted that will help with this. But I think where companies sort of struggle is that they think something, oh, this will be easy. We'll institute this incentive program, and it seems like it's really straightforward. But then, and it's, oh, we're going to drive performance, we're going to improve results, but then it often falls flat or even maybe even backfires because, there's common pitfalls like I was talking about before where you might be in misalignment with like what the broader goals are. And then you overlay some complex, unclear structure. There's possibly poor communication. Because I'm just going to tell you now, I've never met a company, including mine, that does not always need to focus on getting better at communicating.
Hmm.
And then
No
there's a
doubt.
lack of transparency. And so then you're sort of undermining that whole motivation, and you have unintended behaviors, like gaming the system and short-term thinking and quality trade-offs. And so, that can be a real issue.
I mean, it sounds like you
Yeah.
both are saying something similar. Basically, let's keep it simple, right?
Keep it
Yes.
Right,
simple.
Campbell? I mean, what are your thoughts? Or
Absolutely
maybe,
right.
where does it fail? I guess that's the other part of it, right? It's not just about keeping it simple, but where are some areas where this process fails?
I think Valentine said it. Transparency is super important, right? You don't want to make it so ambiguous and so complex that your workforce doesn't know how they're going to achieve their whatever the incentive is, right? You've got to keep it well rounded too. I mean, you don't want to rob Peter to pay Paul. So keeping it tied to throughput, quality, and attendance. I mean, if you hit those three things, you're going to have a pretty good workforce, right? So if your incentive program allows for um, additional dollars to go into the pockets of your employees, as long as they are meeting those expectations across those three buckets, you're going to see a performance increase.
Mhm.
Oh. Well,
Totally agree.
let's move on from there to agile insourcing, right? That's the kind of the next item on our list here. How would you describe agile insourcing, Campbell?
Flexibility, training your workforce so that instead of cycling through temporary labor, you've got a workforce that you can control the movement of, and move the people to the work and being able to adjust to the last second changes or the challenges that you deal with or the new demands of things that are going on, it sets you up for success from an agility perspective.
I mean,
Mhm.
I think this is exactly where agility comes into play. Is this idea that you have flexibility, you have an agile team, you guys are managing and staying on top of these things, and so you're able to ramp up and down, right, Campbell?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You know, you've got to have a pool of people and understand what they're capable of and build some expertise in that group around the different things that they may have to step into and support at any point. And by doing so, you give yourself some runway to be able to again adjust to whatever's going on.
I mean, I guess Valentine, what are your thoughts? Why do companies hesitate on agile insourcing?
I think that they hesitate mostly because it feels risky, scary. Ooh, I might lose control. What, I don't own this. What does that mean? Or why do you think that will work better than what I've been doing forever? And so I think that there's some of that that goes along with that risk factor. But I also think that the long-term reliance on just plain temp help
Hmm.
is actually a
Yes,
bigger
Emma
risk.
is.
Yeah.
So far we've talked about one of our tips was about incentives and how do we drive quality and attendance. Now we talked about agile insourcing and some of the what does that mean and where does agility fit in that space. I think as we move through our presentation, our third one is going to be about culture of success.
Mm,
Is in other words, how do we it's an operational item, right? And culture sounds like a soft topic not just in the warehouses. I mean, culture is kind of a soft topic in any business, but ultimately it's about operations and it's about culture. So why don't we focus a little bit more about how do we create the culture of success? Valentine, you have any thoughts on it?
well, I think again, it starts with sort of how you take care of your folks. I think that it is important to note that culture-driven environments help with retention. They absolutely do. And so, and then what we know is retention drives operational stability. And then operational stability drives, being more productive, cost savings, all of those things. So
And more
I think
importantly,
that's
we don't have
very,
that $4,600
I
each
know.
time.
That's right. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Campbell, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, to put it simply, I mean, when your employees see growth paths, and they appreciate the culture of their team, right, and the people that they work with every day, they stay, right, and when they stay, performance stabilizes.
Mhm.
Mm,
I mean,
or even gets better.
you both said some great items around this. Um, there's obviously a measurable ROI, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the question is, how do we define that ROI? What are the where does that go, Campbell, in terms of being able to show that there's an ROI in this process?
Yeah, it shows up a number of places that we've talked about, right? I mean, again, back to absenteeism. People are going to show up for work more often. They're not going to quit, so you have lower turnover.
Mhm.
They're focusing on their quality of work, so you have higher accuracy. So I think those are some of the big ones.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Valentine?
I think for me and the folks that I talk to from a higher level up in the boardroom perspective, I think culture absolutely protects your margin. Period. End of story. It does. No doubt.
I mean, I think, as we continue with the concept of ROI, I think, the numbers are important, right? And we have some interesting numbers that we're referring to over here. Valentine, you want to kind of give us an overview on the
Yeah. So,
uh,
what
incentive
we
programs?
Yes, and what we found is, like 60 to 70% of companies use incentive programs, but there's like 90% of and I'm sorry, 90% of high performing organizations do too, and that's not a coincidence. So I think that the companies that are winning this year, next year, moving forward, they're not guessing. They're measuring. They're putting it in place and they're saying, COOs, CFOs, they're looking at all these things and they're saying, I'm looking at where I am today. I'm going to implement this incentive and then I'm going to go look at where that brings me. And that's going to tell me if it works or if it doesn't. And I think that the trends are more around attendance, productivity, quality. You don't want to really do things around safety. OSHA is not a real fan of that because I think if you do an incentive based on safe work practices, people will stop reporting things that have occurred. And we don't want that to be. So, again, that's what I meant earlier about you have to be real careful about what incentives you're putting in place and make sure that the bigger picture and that everybody's on the same page because you could sort of do some damage to yourself if you're not careful. Right.
And I think, and this is, iJility is knowledge and experience in managing warehouse labor. These, you guys, again, you guys have had some great examples as we've been talking. And these incentive programs, the retention programs, the recruiting process we talked about. I mean, Campbell, you got anything to add to this discussion here?
Yeah, just looking at this slide, that 33% tie compensation to performance metrics. That's
Yeah.
shockingly low. I mean, that's I wonder what the other 66% are doing. You've got to know where your dollars are going, right? And your people have to understand how to get there. Otherwise, again, it's this big ambiguous effort, and maybe you get an incentive or maybe you don't. But at the end of the day, if you're tying it to a performance metric, you can feel good about, I mean, it's an additional cost, but the ROI is much greater when you can tie it directly to the performance that you're seeing as a result.
I mean, basically,
Yeah.
you're saying that's where the gap is, or the opportunity
Yeah.
lies, is that gap between compensation and performance. And hopefully, we're not going to be doing pizza parties in them.
Right. Right.
I love pizza, but
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not
That
going to
doesn't
work
quite cut.
anymore. All right, guys, we're getting close to the end of our show. Let's start it. Let's open this up for questions and answers. And give me 1 second as I take a look at the questions that we're going to be getting. And so, I think, let's see what we have here. All right, we're reading some of these questions. Very interesting. All right, so here's one. What's one workforce challenge you're struggling with right now? Any thoughts from either of you?
Uh, hmm. What is one? Gosh, I think we struggle every day because we're dealing with people. So
Yeah,
I don't know if there is
ultimately.
just one. I think we're all struggling with people, the lack of engagement of
yeah,
folks, I think it is,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
I agree with that. I mean,
that's a good one.
again, back to the snowball effect. It's a good point. You're turning over folks because you're not meeting their expectations, and unfortunately, I think an indirect result of that, or an unintended result, is you end up training, your team ends up training a large number of people, and after a certain point, they become numbers and they're not people anymore, right? And so
Right.
you're less engaged with them, and you're sort of operating under the assumption that they're just going to leave too, right? And so again, without a hard reset and sort of a mindset shift, you're going to continue to exacerbate the issue by treating them that way. So yeah, Valentine, I agree with that entirely for sure.
Let's take a look at another question over here. So, what's going to separate winners in 2027? It's not just about 2026 anymore. So, what do you think? Where do you think this is going to go?
I think giving yourself the ability to have some predictability in your performance and setting yourself
Mhm.
up to know that when the variability and the shifts and the volatility comes, that you have a plan to react and you know how your team's going to react to that.
Mhm.
Cool. Valentine?
I would also just like to add on to what he said. I think it's about partnerships
Mm.
and who you decide to partner with, whether it's a temp service, whether it's a in-sourced labor, strategy company, whatever it may be. I think it's very important that you know that they're going to add the right level of value and participation into what you're trying to do. Because so many times I see, and this is not I used to sell temp help for years, so there's nothing wrong with that model. But what I did know about it was my job to jam as many bodies in your building as I could get. And it was your job to train them. And if you didn't like
Mhm.
them, you throw back and I just sent you more. Well,
Mhm.
that's not really a
Yes, not gonna
long-term
work.
vision partner, right? Okay.
That's for
And so
sure.
I would say ownership of your workforce strategy is critical.
Very
Just say
interesting.
it again.
We have another question over here. So, how would you define what calm looks like, Campbell?
Uh, Calm is stable attendance, controlled costs, consistent output. I think that's every operator's dream. Walking into
Hmm.
the door, for the day and knowing that you're getting those three things. Sets you at ease.
Very cool. Valentine?
I'll sum it up and say I think it's confidence, not reaction.
Hmm.
Very good. And on that note, I want to thank everybody for joining us today as we talked about chaos to calm with Valentine Trent and Campbell Diehl of iJility. If you want more information, their contact information, their email, and their phone numbers are in the presentation that we are going to be distributing to everybody. On that note, I want to thank everybody for coming, and we will check back in with you at another time. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Melih.